isn't it?
Yeah.
Nice and peaceful being out in the country.
I thought we were at Terracotta House.
We're at Terracotta House by Austin Maynard Architects.
We're not in the country.
No. That was part of the brief. I want a country house and a veggie patch.
In a city.
Really true.
So tell us about Terracotta House, Andrew.
Interesting project because there wasn't a project to start with. So our client approached us and they lived in Fitzroy, which is like the bohemian, trendy, dense, grungy part of Melbourne in Australia. And she wanted to have a farmhouse, but she didn't want to move.
That's a common problem, I think.
Yeah.
A tree change without tree change.
Yeah. And really wanted a veggie patch, wanted to work, get her hands into the soil. And that, she just asked me to go shopping with her. Can we find something in the same postcode that could actually have room for a substantial veggie garden?
I guess it's like Garden House, where the centre is the garden, and her brief is basically the veggie patch is the thing, and then a series of kind of farm-like dwellings, really, around it.
Yeah.
You know, using your strategy of breaking down forms into multiple volumes, so that it feels like a series of sheds or country farmhouses.
Yeah. Well, the diagram that I used, based on some of the things she spoke about to start with, and some of the images she showed, was just a terracotta pot, just as simple as terracotta pot. And I just thought, what if we just dot those around the garden? What if we put one there? What if we sit one on top of an old recycled brick ruin? So they became sort of detritus. Hey, buddy. So they became like the detritus of a veggie garden, like the leftovers, the sort of, it was just more of this lying around. And what's interesting in terms of talking to her, the house wasn't that much of a priority. She just wanted utility. I need somewhere to cook food, wash myself and sleep. The focus was the garden, so we had to make sure that it was central and all spaces connected with that.
Terracotta is an interesting choice because it's not really fashionable material. I think the first time I've ever seen sort of modern use of terracotta is Renzo Piano's work.
Yeah, a suburban vernacular material that, like so many suburban vernacular materials, went very out of fashion. But it's actually still a really cost-effective material. But typically you use it on the roof. So here we've actually clad the building in it as a bit of a nod to the Australian vernacular, but more as a nod to the simple terracotta pot.
Is there any advantage to using that as a cladding?
Terracotta itself changes temperature really quickly. So that means if you use it as a skin, when it's really hot, it basically just heats up and then the breeze just blows the heat off it. So you're basically using it as an absorption and a way to just shed the heat. And then behind that we have a stud frame with continuous high quality insulation. So it's just acts like an esky, then with this heat shield. Because, you use ceramic tiles on the space shuttle. It's a similar idea. That's super high tech at AMA. And just like we planned at Charles' house as well, where we use slate, we want it to get grubby. Like, it's porous. It'll start to get things growing on it. You'll get lichen, and it'll start to age and become green. So it's a lovely natural material that sits with this idea of this garden taking over, but it eventually will go green. It'll eventually become part of the garden. This was interesting because the brief was that my client's son and his wife would also live here. But unlike Charles, where it was the kids creating a space for mum to move into, this is where you have the older generation saying, look, the younger generation can't afford any housing in Australia.
Especially in the inner city parts of Melbourne.
How do you save for a deposit, let alone buy a property here with the ridiculous prices? So what we've done here is the original house where our client's son and partner live and will become their family home is the original timber cottage that's on the northern street frontage. And then my client's house is actually the house behind us, which sits on the southern boundary. We're in the southern hemisphere and faces north. So all the glazing faces north.
So it gets all the sun.
It's all the sun.
And the garden.
That's right. So the garden's always bright. But then we've got this third space, which is next to us, which is the library. And it really is a space that's constantly changing.
It's a family hall.
That's a nice way to put it. So
in the Chinese house, that would be the hall. That would be the family hall. That is actually where family comes together.
Yeah. That's nice. So sometimes they'll have dinner at this house, sometimes they'll have dinner at that house. But if there's guests over and things like that, they'll say, right, we're having dinner in the family hall. I like that. But also, when it's not
patent. So you're going to show me around?
Nah, that's it. Goodbye. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this shit.
Going to show us around then?
Let's go have a look. Start at the front.
Okay.
All right, north that way, so the sun's that way, southern hemisphere. So this is the cottage at the front where the son's family lives. You've got the original entry there. You can also, off this main street, head straight into the garden on the side there. So you don't have to go through this cottage to get to the next cottage. And there's also a third entry from the rear laneway that goes directly into the rear cottage. Let's look at the first one. Kitty, kitty. So typically what happens in these older houses is you have a central corridor. You can see we've left the remnant of the old walls, and you would walk past bedroom spaces to get to kitchen and living, which connected with the backyard. But we've turned that around here because that's north and it's a really beautiful community here. They all know each other and there's some existing big windows. We've actually cleared out these walls so you've got living space and kitchen, which connects with the sun and connects with the street. So they make their brekkie and they go and sit out on the front porch and talk to their neighbours. It's called community. And then you have the private spaces at the back. But if you keep going, you end up in the central shared garden. We've just left the original cottage and we've come out into the garden. And what's this called now, Kev?
Family hall.
The family hall. We've sat that to the western side because there is quite a large extension. So we've decided to back that against the bigger neighbouring building and open it towards the east. Now, from the front door, that original central corridor, look what we've done. We've continued that all the way through. So we haven't planned this space nor the rear spaces as an internal plan that dictates where the walls sit. We've put this central circulation path straight through and we've said that needs to connect all of these spaces. We demolished part of the original cottage and then we just relined it in weatherboards. So it's got the original material. We've got the wall of the neighbour's house, big hall in there, and then the most important part of the house, the veggie garden. You know, this was the brief. Everything else is secondary to it. And then we've got a little patio out here, again facing north. We've got permanent sun protection where we need it. But here, this is where we're going to slowly grow vines over it. So that'll start to give more and more sun protection to these spaces. And again, you can just open up those doors and connect the kitchen and dining directly out into this space and then the living out into this space. And then upstairs is my client's master bedroom. So bedroom, bathroom up there. Really simple little cottage. We're still walking in a straight line from that front door, so we've let the original house dictate this main spine through the entire home, and we end up with a kitchen and a living space. If we keep going, we end up out in the laneway. So this is the front door of this particular cottage. So now we're in the laneway at the back. So the cottage sits on the southern boundary, and this is the straight line we've gone through. So the front door dictates this entire spine straight through the house. Now, in Melbourne, in Australia, there's a lot of these bluestone laneways. They're gorgeous, and they're completely underutilised. So these big blocks, the future for them really is for second homes to be built hard against them. So imagine this in potentially 20 years as this really activated, beautiful space as homes start to spill out onto them. But the important thing of having a multi-generational house is you don't have people treading on top of each other. They have their own way of being able to get in and out of the site. So this is the front door, as it were, for this particular cottage. But you can also slip down the side of the house if you want to. Formally, you can see what we're doing here. We've got like the terracotta pot planted on top of the old ruinous brick. We built this. It wasn't there originally. It's not really a ruin, but it's the terracotta pot, and then that's basically exactly the same size over there. So you think about the diagrams we've been talking about in past episodes. We've got this central spine of circulation that we've got these objects coming off, and then in terms of form, we've got these forms that are related but different, and we articulate them very clearly.
So the overall forms, it's really articulated by the window openings, aren't they? And also the skylights.
Yeah, and that's one thing I didn't mention, the skylights. So there's two skylights that face east. So you get this little hood that acts as like a blinker that helps wake up my client.
Yeah, it's a classic thing, right? Bedrooms on the east side, so you get the sun.
The morning light.
Yeah.
And then the other one over the lounge room faces east because you occupy that usually later in the day, so you get this secondary light bouncing into it. The other thing is this one for us was quite a tight budget. So one of the reasons we used all of this black was to tie the details together, so we didn't have to get materials to really join neatly. Like we've actually just got bits of flashing that are riveted through onto each other that come to aluminium frame windows. It's not as neat as we would typically do in our office. It's good enough for other offices. But we decided to just make it all black so it all ties together. But also, because I'm a comic book geek, I love line thicknesses and the way that artists outline things. I think that's one of the reasons I geek out about architectural drawings, the depth of line weight. And so this has become a bit of a line weight comic book for me. So instead of trying to spend a lot of money getting these materials to chamfer and connect with each other like we would elsewhere, I've just treat it like a big fat textile line around the outside of the building. Made it cheaper, but it also made me geek out because comics are cool. Similar to the Heidi 2, you can see where we're continuing the brickwork in through the building. So we don't change what we're doing simply because there's a waterproof line. The brick just keeps coming through. So the story of that brick plinth continues through the building, and then we end up just cutting a hole in it.
I love how low the ceiling is too.
Yeah. Compression, and then that makes it feel much more open when you get to this point. And so you get that great connection with the garden, looking through, connecting with the family hall. Ooh, love it. And then you've got the couch here and that eastern light. So again, this is usually an afternoon evening space. So you end up with this light that's bouncing off the terracotta. So when you look up there, you actually get the terracotta as the view. You don't look at just terrible flashings and things like that. Thinking about what people are looking at, bouncing back into this space. And look how much effort we've gone to make this really flush here. So the door that goes into the bathroom, just two doors, no sort of bit of wall in between. And then this space here is a study space where there's this sliding panel. So you get this study space that looks out into the garden and the lounge room, but then that can slide down and it can be a guest room. So there's potential here to actually sleep a lot of people when you need to.
Can you show us that door opening?
Which door opening? This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, look at the way we've detailed this. So the nib is actually back there. So you end up with less lines in it. Terrazzo, so yummy. And then looking out into the laneway. And hey, not almost like Heidi, where instead of hiding away, just put some textured glass and enjoy a bit of an aspect outside. And then you can also slide that open if you want.
I love the layering, looking across these volumes as well. You go,
Yeah.
it actually frames it, and the change of materials as well gives it extra depth, even though it's actually quite small.
Mm. And that's a product of it being, this is the brick building, that's the terracotta building, and this is the infill. And so the infill is described differently. It's got the same paving as happens outside, so it's treated somewhat like an outdoor space. It's got timber lining, which is different to the other materials. So this is the infill between the brick wall, the brick pod, and then the terracotta pod. So when you look at this, it's exactly the same as I was just talking about. The terracotta keeps coming through. We don't just change that to plasterboard, and then it keeps going through there. So it's legible what you're doing in terms of form, both inside and outside. And then the beautiful wallpaper we've used by an Indigenous artist whose name I can't remember, but there'll be a link in bio. It's awesome wallpaper.
I love the openness of the kitchen in almost like a farmhouse-like quality as well.
And that was a big part of the brief. So like a lot of architects, I want to hide everything away. But our client made it clear that no, it is a farmhouse and everything's on display. So I sort of had to go, okay, we need to embrace this. There's wheelbarrows and there's pots everywhere and rakes and hoses laying on the ground. And then you've got your tomatoes and everything's out on display. And it's like, okay, if that's how you live, let's embrace that.
And I think that's an important point. Everyone's different.
Everybody's different and you work for them. It's not your house, it's their house. So you've just got to protect them along the way and advise them and make the best of decisions you sometimes don't agree with. Yeah, so we're sneaking upstairs. We're leaving the brick plinth and we're going up into the terracotta box. And when you come up here, you'll notice there's a sneaky little slider up there. There's a window and a slider, which will make a bit more sense when you come into the bathroom. More of this beautiful wallpaper, just like we talked about in the last episode. Natural light at the end of circulation paths. Then we come into bathroom and master bedroom. View down into the garden, so you're always, just like a garden house, you're always connected back into that central shared space. And then you can see this natural light, just beautiful, delicate light coming down the wall there. So that's where there's that eastern hood. So in the morning, my client just wakes naturally because the sun starts to beam in through there. And then she gets this great view that just looks back to the gum trees in the distance. So in the bathroom, it's really compact, but lots of natural light, so it feels really big. But that slider that I pointed out before in the stair is here. So you can actually slide that away and then get this view back to the city.
When you're in the bath.
When you're laying in the bath and then looking up to the clouds and the birds and the greenery and the trees.
Why do I always end up filming you in a shower and bath or something? Take us into the hall.
Murphy bed. So there's a bed permanently there that you can just pull down for a guest, but essentially just a flexible space. Piano at one end, and then always these little references back to each pavilion. So I love the way that you always get a little reference to the terracotta. Oh, and then another one of these hoods, but this one faces north. So this one is letting in huge amounts of winter sun, concrete slab again, but then we've got louvers on it, so the high summer sun gets cut out. And then she's got a stick here somewhere where she can just open the louvers and then just let any heat build up, just vent through there.
A bit of Venturi effect.
They decided, which I think is a really good use of space, to just share one laundry instead of jamming laundries into each of the spaces, which is a good use of space. And similar as we do in multi-res, make it near a garden, near a shared space, because it's actually kind of a social thing to do, to wash your jocks with other people. You remember I mentioned the timber back there? So we've got these, internally you can read the terracotta box, you can read the brick box, and then we've got timber and the stone. Well, the same thing's happening in the original cottage. So we're back at the original cottage, you've got the stone on the ground, and then we've had to carve this chunk out of the weatherboard building. So we've used the same timber as we did in the new cottage to express that sort of scarring. Kev's been awake all night editing one of your videos. This is what he does for you guys. He's been slaving away over a hot digital oven, creating these masterpieces. Hasn't slept at all. So you might see him doze off at some stage during the film. It's not because this is a boring project, it's because he's tired.